Hi there, Malcolm here for my 177th Booktube video, and today I'll be bringing you my October wrap-up and November TBR. Lots to get through, so let's get cracking. Let's start the numbers. So I managed to finish 8 titles in the month of October, totaling roughly 3,052 pages. Not as many as in September, but it still puts me 7,224 pages up on the same time last year. Last year was rubbish. I've already read more books than I did last year, so doing well. So first up is my book of the month, This Charming Man by C.K. McDonnell. This is book 2 of the Stranger Times series. The premise more or less being, if the X-Files were a newspaper agency and really funny. I know the X-Files does have its funny moments, but this is the occasional episode. And I suppose the Lone Gunmen kind of count as a newspaper agency, but anyway. So in this world, it's been established that there is the normal world and the slightly less normal world, which is kept in secret. The Stranger Times has, for years, unintentionally been reported on the secret world until the events of the first book, which kind of made them believe it was all true. And for this paranormal world, there's an organisation pretty much keeping a lid on everything. And this organisation approaches the Stranger Times to get them to investigate what can only be described as a vampire attack, despite the fact that vampires don't exist and never have existed. And so we have our adventure. The series generally follows the character of Hannah, who joined the Stranger Times at the beginning of the first book, but the company itself is full of interesting characters who all get to do their own investigations and excitements along the way. This one turned out to be a really intriguing mystery with a paranormal twist, with a very relevant who and what and why. This was filled with many laugh-out-loud moments. I really enjoyed the first book and I really enjoyed the second book. The books don't necessarily have to be read in order, so you can jump straight into this one. It does refer to a few things that happened in book 1, but in a self-contained way. Yeah, highly recommend this series. Booktastic. And after that I read Star Wars Emissaries to Malastare, written by Tim Truman. This is part of the Republic series of graphic novels set between The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. The books typically focus on the Jedi up to some thing, and indeed this one, a bunch of Jedi go to Malastare as emissaries, hence the title. Basically there's a civil war going on and they've gone to mediate. And I was really excited to finally get my hands on a copy. These are getting like gold dust. Unfortunately the story was mediocre at best. The artwork was okay. It's Jan Josima, who is pretty awesome with the artwork. But there was just far too many sort of empty Jedi phrases. There's a whole Jedi ceremony that we get to witness, which in one sense could be a bit of more backstory about the Jedi and how they operate, but another was it added nothing to anything whatsoever. The main story then concluded without any actual sense of any conclusion whatsoever, and then fed into a secondary story where they end up on Nar Shaddaa, one of the Hutt worlds, and then get embroiled in some thing that happens there, which again doesn't really come to any conclusion. You do learn a little bit about Hutt physiology, which is pretty cool, but I would say it's probably worth reading if you're a collector or if you enjoy the series. But considering how hard it was to get hold of a copy, I was a bit disappointed. And after that I then read Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Willow and Tara. Willow and Tara and Dawn go on a little adventure together, where effectively they come across mass deforestation and the things of the forest are fighting back. And so they end up mediating between kill all humans and chop all trees down. Oh yeah, that was the second story. The first story is Willow and Tara have a mutual, inverted commas, friend who they don't really include in anything because they're really annoying, and they go off and do a spell of their own which kind of backfires massively, and then has a huge effort to try and reverse the damage. The artwork was okay, a little cartoony, but perfectly serviceable, and the stories, again, were okay. There was nothing particularly special here. I enjoyed reading it, but that was about it, so worth reading. And after that I then read Spike Old Wounds, and this looks to be set after the Angel series, which I haven't seen, so there's things that happened that I didn't know about. And in this one, a unresolved murder from Spike's past comes back to haunt him, and he's got to try and find out what's going on so he can clear his name. It was alright. Interesting style of artwork. I quite liked it. My main complaint was it's extremely short. It's only about 48 pages long, though worth reading. And after that I then read Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Tales of the Slayers. A series of short stories of Slayers through the ages. I've read 3 of the short story novel collections, which I really enjoyed. I do like the variety you can get, and there's no guarantee that the Slayer or the Watcher or anyone's going to survive or be the good people. All sorts happens in this. Each story has its own unique type of artwork. Some are really good, some are not so good, some I didn't care for at all. But lots of different designs, lots of different styles. But on the whole, I'm a sucker for this sort of thing. Booktastic. And after that, I then read book 2 of the Night's Dawn trilogy, The Neutronium Alchemist by Peter F. Hamilton. And this was actually an audible narrated by John Lee. Now, I've talked about John Lee's narration in a previous video. I'll leave a link to that below, so I'm not going to go through all that again. And at just over 40 hours of listening time, this was another mammoth story where I did get the feeling that they could have taken out quite a huge chunk of it without changing anything, but never mind. So following on the events of book 1, the souls of the dead are returning due to some reason and possessing the bodies of the living. And this book focuses a lot on how the infections spread across the Confederation, as well as the various attempts to try and stop the encroaching wave of the undead, while other characters are racing to try and find a weapon of mass destruction called the Neutronium Alchemist, with view of blowing up a planet's star in retaliation of the genocide that that planet caused upon another planet 30 years previously. And of course the dead hear of this thing and also decide they want it for themselves. Another emergence is the return of Al Capone, who very quickly establishes a new organisation of the dead on a planet called New California, where he has his own agenda for conquest and domination. Obviously, there's a lot of other things going on there as well, but that's pretty much the gist of the main plot lines. And of course, we follow many of the characters from the first book who survived as they go on their further adventures, doing the various things and trying to survive in this one. And this one really hit the ground running. I found book 1 took a long time to actually start doing anything in particular that was worth getting behind. Whereas book 2, and if anything, I'll say it's not really book 2, it's just a continuation of book 1. It's just because each book is literally like over 1,000 pages, it's been split for convenience more than anything else. Yeah, I'm really enjoying the characters. There's a few new ones. There's some good surprises and twists along the way. Yeah, really enjoy it. Yeah, asks lots of very big questions. Booktastic. And after that, I then read Buffy the Last Vampire Slayer, and I believe one of the more recent Buffy the Vampire Slayer tales told. And this one is set in a future Buffyverse where Buffy is 50, which when you look back to see how old the actual show is and how old Buffy would be actually now, just shut up, okay? It's also an alternative future where most of everyone we know from Buffy's entourage are all dead. We find out why in here. The vampires are now legal citizens and are protected by various accords, so Buffy is not allowed to do her slaying anymore. She is the last slayer until a child turns up who claims to be a slayer. So very much a dystopian future Buffy, who's playing the part of reluctant mentor, and despite the loss and issues she's going through, is extremely witty and pulls no punches with her scathing remarks. I love this version of Buffy, she's hilarious. The artwork is pretty good, and there's some fantastic cover artworks interspersed throughout the book, which are also excellent and pretty clever. May not be relevant to the story itself, but all good stuff. I really enjoyed the story. I really enjoyed the characters. Obviously, it was bittersweet knowing that certain characters we know that we like from the show are no longer with us, although there are a couple of familiar faces. Highly recommend this one, booktastic. And then after that, I then finally finished reading the mammoth book of best short SF novels. 800 pages long, 13 novellas. This took most of my reading time after reading this charming man, hence all the graphic novels. So 13 novellas. I'll just quickly whiz through them. I have to look at the contents to remember what they are. So first up was Sailing to Byzantium by Robert Zilverberg, where planet Earth only has like 5 cities left, and one's always being rebuilt in the form of some historical city. And the population literally spend their time as tourists going from city to city. And we follow a man who's brought from the 20th century, New York I believe, who finds himself in this world just trying to come to grips with the new reality that he's in and where he fits. I quite enjoyed it. It kind of didn't go anywhere for a long time until finally it's revealed what this is all about. Something I did kind of work out a bit, but no, it was alright. Quite enjoyed it. Next up is Surfacing by Walter John Williams, and this follows a grizzled scientist on a boat in the middle of some alien ocean trying to find out about the mysterious entities that live deep underwater. Yeah, he meets a girl. There's some other things that happen, but not really relevant. Yeah, it was alright. It was a quite enjoyable story. Well, quite a enjoyable tale. Didn't really go anywhere, although the title gave away the ending, really. And it did kind of end on a cliffhanger. Oh yeah, there was a weird aspect about this girl because she was occasionally possessed by an alien entity who uses her as a tourist destination, if anything else, which was kind of an unnecessary storyline. The story would have been just as fine without that peculiarity, but yeah, it's there, it happened. Then it's the Hemingway Hoax by Joe Haldeman. I was really excited about this one. I really like The Forever War and some of the other books I've read by him, so I was very excited to see that he'd written a story for this. The Hemingway Hoax basically looks at the missing manuscripts of Ernest Hemingway that got stolen at a train station, and a man's idea of writing the missing manuscripts and trying to pass them off as the authentic deal. And for some reason, some time agency doesn't want him to do this because it will ruin the future and attempt to kill him. Now, the premise was quite interesting, but then it derailed quite quickly into some weird pseudo-psychological nonsense, really. I understand what it was trying to do, but I didn't care for it much. It was a disappointment to me. Next up is Mr. Boy by James Patrick Kelly, and a future where the human body is augmented to make it look like a dinosaur, or you can make yourself look like you're 13 all the time, as is the case with Mr. Boy, who's actually 20-something. Mr. Boy tries to live life as a child, only he eventually falls in love, and that complicates the hell out of a lot of things. That's the main thrust of the story. There's a lot of other things that go on there which I found a bit unnecessary, really, but it's in there, and some weird stuff. Disturbing imagery of the future, really, and possibly accurate. I don't know. It was all right. Beggars in Spain by Nancy Kress. Now, this was an interesting one where this one looks at designer babies, and there's a couple arrange for their baby to have the gene that turns off the need for sleep. And they end up bearing twins, one who has this gene and one does not. And the one with the gene turns out to be a super intelligent evolution of humanity and excels at everything, and her sister is ordinary. And it starts off with this interesting tale, and you think, oh, that's quite intriguing, interesting way it goes. And then as these children grow up, and as other children are also born with this gene due to this design specification, they're seen as a threat, and the way the people of the world turn on them was really chilling. This was a very cleverly written tale that is allegorical for various minority groups, and just how quickly the law can turn on them as well. And human rights and things are revoked, and yeah, scary stuff, but very good. Possibly my favourite story in the book. Griffin's Egg by Michael Swanwick is set on the moon. Earth is pretty much at war with itself, and we have people on the moon who are just trying to survive, getting on with what they're supposed to be doing, when a new virus is released in the compound, sending everyone who's not wearing a suit mad, and it's a case of trying to survive in that new environment while Earth is blowing itself up. Quite a good, exciting story with an interesting conclusion to it. Yeah, really enjoyed that one. Outnumbering the Dead by Frederick Pohl. A lot of these books do have a sort of underlying focus on immortality. And in this one, everyone's immortal, that due to a procedure that's done on a newborn infant. Unfortunately, there's a very small percentage of children who it doesn't take, and either kills them outright at the time, or they start ailing when, the body starts to do such a thing, and it's a case of, you're not immortal after all. And we follow a celebrity, very famous actor, who is such a sufferer of this condition towards the end of his life, as he just goes about his daily existence and looking to possible futures. For the most part, I found this particularly boring, because we do get bogged down with the minutiae of reading scripts, rehearsals. I was like, I don't need any of this crap. Just one line, we rehearsed that afternoon. That's it. We don't need the whole what they rehearsed and how they rehearsed it and what went on. It was overly long in that regard, but the actual underlying story and the conclusion I really enjoyed. Forgiveness Day by Ursula K. Le Guin is set in one of the universes that she's created. I've not read any of the books from it, and I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. But this one seems very reminiscent of recent events of the 7th of October, in that ultimately a person on a planet is doing a thing and is kidnapped and held hostage for a period of time, only for that not to be what actually happened, despite the huge amount of war and death that follows. I quite enjoyed the tale. I mean, it did meander a lot at the beginning before the main event, but when I finished that book, the news was very reminiscent of what I'd just read, and maybe I'm seeing things that weren't actually there, but yes. Interesting. If you read Forgiveness Day, you'll know what I'm talking about. Next up was The Cost to be Wise by Maureen F. McHugh. It's a bit of a weird one. This was set on a planet with an indigenous population. Well, not really indigenous, but it's one of those, old Earth had populated this planet and then lost everything, and then so those left on the planet were just left to exist on their own for untold generations, and then humanity has managed to reach the stars again and come back, as it were. As we follow a girl from one of these such planets, and she just goes through her life, but things go very sideways very quickly, and I don't quite get the relevance of the title, and the ending was very unsatisfactory to me. It's alright, but what goes on it is pretty harrowing, and the payoff I don't think was worth it. Oceanic by Greg Egan. What the hell was that one? This one is set on a planet where, not too dissimilar to what was mentioned in the previous planet, Earth has come, landed, and not come back since, and so the population have myths now about how they came to this planet, and they got their own religion. And there's a procedure that they go through if they're true believers, where they then feel like they are walking with their personal god and all the rest of it. Only this guy who investigates the local microorganisms in the water comes to alternative conclusions as to what was really going on and the effect it has on the population about their beliefs versus science. Quite an interesting one. It was okay. Tendelio's Story by Ian MacDonald, based on his Chagga series, where a meteorite hits Mount Kilimanjaro, infected with a sort of spore of nanomachines that start terraforming the planet at a rate of like 50 metres a day in an ever-expanding circular circle. I don't know what happened to the original book, but this follows one character who lives somewhere in Africa, not close to this event, but they are aware that this thing is coming ever slowly, and just their point of view of the events and the various things that happen and what they have to do to survive. That was enough to pique my interest, and maybe I will at one point read the geology that this is set from, and with a very interesting and hard-hitting conclusion. Next up was New Light on the Drake Equation by Ian R. McLeod. The Drake Equation is that crazy formula about the possibility of life coming into existence, and therefore how likely is it to have life elsewhere in the universe that we can actually meet. And we basically follow the last man of SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, as he stares at the stars, listening. And he goes through quite a lot of alcohol in the process. It meanders, it doesn't do a huge amount, and then there's a thing that happens near the end which may or may not have happened, and may or may not mean that he was successful, but you don't know. It was alright. I think it was kind of an unnecessary one, really. And then finally, Turquoise Days by Alistair Reynolds. This feeds into the Revelation Space series, although you don't need to have read the Revelation Space to follow the book, because it's set isolated on another planet, another ocean one, where there are these floating masses of, green stuff, which is sort of intelligent in a way. I think it does feature in the Revelation Space book, but again, you don't need to know about them particularly. But they're investigating them, and things happen, particularly when they get visited by an apparent science team who have their own agenda, and then there's a member of them who's got their own separate agenda to them, and it's like of who's the right one here, who's got the good idea. Yeah, it's a lot of twists and double twists, quite intriguing, with an ending that is left quite open. So all in all, a good collection of stories, worth buying, I think. I think some of them are definitely worth rereading, choice ones particularly. So quickly on to my planned reading for November. Book of the month is Marvel Wastelanders Star-Lord by Sarah Corkwell, and this follows an aging Star-Lord and an aging Rocket, the last of the Guardians of the Galaxy, as they come to Earth to collect a MacGuffin, only to find Victor Doom has got there first and done some bad stuff and wiped out virtually all the heroes. And so life's going to be a lot harder on Earth than believed to be before. Based on a set of podcasts, this one was written by Benjamin Percy, which I've not listened to, but I've looked at the cast. It's quite a good cast for the voices on that. Looking forward to reading that, seeing how that ends up. Getting darker by the second. And after that, I'll then read the 3 Star Wars books I meant to read the previous month. So we've got Kenobi by John Jackson Miller, Scourge by Jeff Grubb, and Survivor's Quest by Timothy Zahn. You notice I actually started this one. I've talked about them in my previous video. I'm not going to waste time here. And if I get that through those 3, I'll then move on to Doctor Who Touched by an Angel by Jonathan Morris. The Weeping Angels are back doing what they do best. Looking forward to reading this one. So that's my main reading. To my wife, I'm still reading Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. Should finish that this month. On Audible, I am now listening to The Naked God, Book 3 of the Night's Dawn trilogy by Peter F. Hamilton, and that's at 47 hours, so that'll take me a little while. And then for my graphic novels, Buffy the Vampire Slayer Frey, set in the far, far, far future, and this is the last graphic novel of that series we've got. Marvel Savage Spider-Man, this is book 2 of Non-Stop Spider-Man. Finally managed to get hold of a copy. He's turned into a giant bug now. What happens next? Deadpool, Suicide Kings. This looks like a lot of fun. Rocket Raccoon, A Chasing Tale. That feeling that one's going to be funny. And I've recently picked up Aliens Rogue and Aliens vs Predator versus the Terminator. Really excited to get hold of a copy of this. There we go. That's quite a lot. I've now got to try and put it all away. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you've had some good reading. Comments below, please. But if you have nothing nice to say, then please keep it to yourself. Thank you. And until next time, see you later.